This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien kicks off today's show discussing a few rallies he is seeing in the grain market and what he expects will impact the market in March. Chip Redmond, K-State meteorologist, keeps the show moving as he explains the mixture of foggy weather and fire concerns in Kansas and what he forecasts this month. Ending the show is a Kansas wheat scoop as Gordon Clark talks about the first realized legacy gift and establishing the Musil Center for Sustainable Wheat Production. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Friday show with a grain market update from K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien. Daniel, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
Daniel, when we look at the markets, are we seeing a little bit of rallying?
We are. We've seen the corn and wheat futures move into areas that we haven't been at least in several weeks. Corn, although it's moved somewhat higher, has probably been the most docile in terms of the historic moves in those markets. But as you look at say May hard red winter wheat, we're trading at about 592. We had been as low as about 518 or so within a month and a half to 2 months ago. So we've kind of steadily in a tortured manner moved to the high side. So that's been positive. Still far short of areas that we had been in the spring of last year. We're up to about $6.40. We've gotten, as of yesterday's close, up to about 593, and that's looking at the current and past history of the May 2026 hard red winter wheat contract. And for soybeans, we've set highs in soybeans up to 1179 and a quarter for the May 26 contract. Hadn't been there on that contract, but basically one and a half to 2 years ago is the last time we were at these type of highs. So you've got some positives going on. They took out if you're a chartist and you pay attention to where historic highs are, the recent highs that we've seen on the top side, again, the May soybean contract was about 10 to 15 cents higher than we'd been historically in November for that contract for the May soybean futures amount. So if you look at trend lines, we're trending higher, and probably some chartists, as they look at this, they'd wonder about topping action when the upside that we've had in markets, when that may slow down, whatever you come at. So we're looking at all that, and it's almost, for the most part, pretty much things that either are happening on the usage side, and we'll talk about some of those, some response in these, especially the corn and soybean markets to the USDA's recent estimate coming out of their Ag Outlook Forum that corn would be down about 4.8 million bushels, down to 94 million this year from what it was last year, and that soybeans would be up just under 4 million, up to about 90. I believe that was up to about 95 million acres planted. But I guess the issue now is as we're into March, we'll have some supply demand numbers coming in that will affect these futures contracts. On Tuesday, there's a USDA WASDE report that'll come into play, but that's probably not the big issue that will affect the markets here in the month of March. On the last day of the month, we'll have the actual official USDA prospective plantings report that will come out, and that'll be the first vote or first indication from farmers themselves via survey of what they think they'll be planting. So that'll be important. We also have the grain stocks report representing what farmers and also agribusinesses have told the USDA that they had for stocks on hand for March 1st. So that'll be important. And anymore, when we look at these stocks reports, they really are truth tellers in that they, by the time we sort of know what stocks we thought we had, the last go around, which for us now would be December 1st, and we see what we got on March 1st, and compare the disappearance that we get during that period to exports, to ethanol usage, to wet corn milling, and have some idea of what we expect to happen in feed usage. Then we start to gain some perspective on not just what the stocks are at that time, but to start to build I guess more perspective on the size of previous year's crops, if we're online or not. And we still do have questions in people's minds. In fact, ongoing government review of numbers coming out of last year for the size of the corn crop, size of soybean crop, whatever. So I guess there's certainly nothing wrong with asking those questions, wanting to find out what was all that played in 2025. But I think that we probably won't know for sure on how that plays out until we get out into the September 1st or the next December 1st stocks report, and can compare what numbers we have then to the usage throughout the whole marketing year, and then look back to 2025 for these major crops and see if that gives us any hint as to how close those are. It is interesting. I would say that, in the back of all these World Ag Supply Demand Estimates reports, you can go back to a section identified as, let's see, I think they call that as it's their reliability section, and they actually list in those sections the reliability at any point in time of their like corn production, exports, domestic use, ending stocks numbers, and they have the same for sorghum, for soybeans, for wheat, etc., both domestic and international. And so they stayed in there how accurate over time they've been. And so any more, when I hear questions about the accuracy of point estimates that we see in the market, I think all that much more. It's good to go back and look at the historic track record of their accuracy, and just realize that the point estimates are almost always going to miss. It's just a matter of the degree, because there's a margin of error there. So anyway, as we talked about that, I would say that we did close for May corn at 453.5 yesterday on Thursday the 5th. And note, we're talking about the May contract, even though that the March contract's still around. The March contract is in the final week or so of what we call the delivery period, when it's going to be closing out here in mid-March. So the elevators and most market watchers have shifted over their focus on futures and calculations of basis off of the May contracts, and that's the case for corn, for soybeans, and for wheat. So corn closed May 26th at 450. The May 26th contract at 453.5. The D's corn contract closed at 477.75, heading towards 480. Well, I think for months now we've been basically looking at $4.40, $4.50. Maybe if we got excited, 455. Well, so we wake up now and look and see what uncertainty about the coming years, then plus that forecast on USDA's part that we'd have lower corn acreage, and now we're about 477, heading towards 480 and possibly even higher. So that's a change that's happened in the corn market. On soybean market, the May 26 futures contract closed at 1179, and that when we look at where we had been, and we talked about this before, that's a gain of over $1.25 or so from where we've been not that long ago. So soybeans have come to the higher side. Exports have held up decently. There's some weather problems, harvest problems down in South America to pay attention to, so that's in play. Wheat futures closed the May contract at 592.75, and that's up 20 cents as of yesterday. We had some other days of strength prior to that. So movement happening in that market as well. The July contract is at 605. So here you have the May contract at 592.75. The July contract catching the first half of harvest in a lot of where we're at in Kansas for hard red winter Wheat, again, up about 12 cents from where that had been. The September contract, if anyone's going to be delivering on a forward contract for wheat at harvest, they're going to be in the last half of July. It's off the September contract that they're pricing, and that's up to 619.5. So that run up in price is not representing any harvest bottom. It's climbing all the way through. So if someone is of a mind to consider some type of forward pricing, I'd look at the carries and forward pricing for wheat coming into harvest. I would certainly look at the carries in that market and not fall prey to what would end up and become a movement for the harvest contracts to go below where the lead contracts. As we're looking right at harvest, we have some better idea of where market prices might go. So interesting days, I guess. So we're in March now, and planting is just around the corner. When you look at the seasonal price trends in Kansas as we come into March, and as we get through March, come into May, June, July, that's when we've been seeing our seasonal highs for almost all these major crops. So it's prime time, showtime, some would say, in terms of looking at old crop sales, maybe even new crop as we head off into the spring months here in Kansas.
Daniel, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Shelby.
That was K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien. You can see more work from Daniel by checking him out on AgManager.info. I will link his profile in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show with a weather update from K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Chip, what recent weather have we seen as we ended February and began March?
Yeah, we had some pretty weather to end February, definitely more seasonal. And, when we look at February as a whole, we had definitely some bipolar weather where we had some warmer periods there, and then we got cooler, but we never really got cold. A lot of central and western Kansas saw either their warmest or their second or third warmest February on record. When we look at the numbers, February is supposed to be the second coldest month of the year, and it just didn't feel like that. And I feel like that's kind of set everyone already into spring mode for the most part. Precipitation-wise, it was a little bit different story just because we had two systems that really kind of dominated the landscape, especially in the eastern side of the state with precipitation. So the statewide total is not a significant value, but we get further west, there were some areas that stayed obviously fairly dry. And, February is our second driest month typically in the year. And we didn't really set any records. We had a couple isolated locations where we did get pretty wet along the I-35 corridor there from Kansas City down to Wichita, and saw 3-4 inches of rain. That resulted in about the second wettest for around Emporia because of that precipitation. That's really the only highlight. We get further west, southwest Kansas, we did get to about 10th driest down around Morton County, where they really received no moisture. And you look back at those other Februaries that had drier conditions, and once you hit zero, you kind of just tie for zero. You can't get anything less than zero. We saw some precipitation over the weekend that, again, was focused primarily on the eastern side of the state, with some totals reaching about 3/4 of an inch, some isolated areas of 2 inches there around Welda and points eastward. But overall, central and western Kansas missed the precipitation yet again. And hopefully we can kind of shift that corridor a little bit further west with the upcoming systems, as there's definitely some parts of the state that need a drink. We look at eastern Kansas, that's where I reside, so I obviously have a little bit more intelligence of what's going on, but things are starting to green up. And soil moisture, looking at the profile overall as you get further west, in central and western Kansas, don't really support green up as readily And just because we're starting with these warmer air in general, we're utilizing and evaporating more moisture off the surface. And so we're kind of losing that surface soil moisture that we did fairly well with throughout the winter months. And it's time to get a drink for portions of central and western Kansas.
And Chip, recently for me, it's felt like it's been really just wet and dreary outside. And is that something we're seeing across the whole state?
Yeah, they say, 90 days after a fog, you're supposed to get rain. And, well, we're going to get a lot of rain in May now, which is, guess what, climatologically favored for a substantial amount increase of rainfall. No, it has definitely been foggy and dreary, especially the eastern third of the state. Almost every day. If we don't have fog, we've got a stratus deck of cloud cover. It's good because we don't evaporate that moisture off the surface, and we keep what little moisture that has been receded in a lot of places. We keep it on the ground. So that's good. It also keeps us from seeing record warmth. We've got the potential to really warm things up when the sun does come out, especially this time of year. And with kind of relatively dry air, I know it's been humid, but the only reason it's been humid is because you've had the cloud cover to keep it humid. As soon as you get rid of that cloud cover, things dry out this time of year, and they dry out really quick. But the result of this moisture is kind of a positive feedback. We had that rain event last weekend. That helped lead into foggy conditions when the skies did clear out. And then when the fog cleared out, well, we had stratus clouds as a result. And the increase in moisture in the mid-levels, like to get those stratus clouds, is that Gulf moisture. It's streaming northward. We've had persistent trough of low pressure system across the western third of the United States, and that allows for that southerly winds to bring that moisture northward into the central plains. That's why we had a storm event last weekend. That's why we had a couple shots of rain throughout the week, especially for far southeast Kansas. Kansas has avoided the heaviest rains, and we want rain. We don't want as much rain as parts of Missouri, Arkansas, even eastern Oklahoma have got over the course of the week. They're counting it in inches to the south and east of Kansas, and that's good. They need the moisture, but a little too much all at once. So we're definitely stuck in this dreary pattern for a little bit. We have an impactful storm system that's going to move through later on Friday here, and that's going to bring with it a much stronger cold front and some severe weather. This is Severe Weather Awareness Week, and it seems fitting to get our first severe weather event during Severe Weather Awareness Week. And we have a chance for tornadoes, especially along the Missouri border, and especially wind and hail along a cold front that comes through Friday evening. And that's going to put it around a quarter to a half inch of rain where the thunderstorms persist. It might see an isolated 1 inch, maybe in far southeast Kansas. But again, precipitation mainly weighted towards the eastern third. And then we have drier conditions in the western third of the state, and we have fire weather concerns as well, with strong winds and really low humidities as this low pressure system tracks across the state. We're going to see high pressure build in behind that low pressure system, and it's going to bring a much quieter weekend for really the entire region of not warm conditions. We're a couple degrees above normal, but it'll be cooler compared to where we were a couple weeks ago. We're not going to be in the 70s and 80s, unfortunately. And then overall dry, and humidity's down into the teens and 20% range with rather light winds. Probably ideal prescribed birding for folks that want to get out. But a good reminder that if you do that, you're still going to get the aggressive fire behavior because you still have those tall grasses that are just still on the landscape. And we're going to carry that into next week with really pleasant conditions and definitely a transition away from that cloudy, dreary.
And as we have started March, any long-term predictions for what we're going to see for the weather forecast?
Yeah, so we've got another storm system that's going to approach the region mid next week. It looks like around the Tuesday time frame. Storm prediction centers already highlight eastern Kansas for a chance of severe weather, so which means you can probably expect fire weather again in the west, and unfortunately not even distribution of rainfall where we need it. And then the pattern changes a little bit where we get more of a ridge of high pressure dominating into next week. So that around the middle of March, going into spring break week for a lot of folks. And I think we'll have pretty quiet conditions in the middle of March with a high pressure, and temperature is going to trend warmer than normal. We're going to get a brief touch of maybe some cooler than normal later next week when we get that bigger cold front coming through, but it'll only be a day or two, and then we warm right back up and dry. I don't really see any big moisture source or big impactful storm system through till maybe the end of March, where we might start to get into a more active pattern. Again, I still expect this active pattern to continue. Enjoy the break. We have it here in the middle of March after next week's system, because with this transition away from La Nina and the East Pacific's already transitioning, we're seeing those waters rapidly warm in the El Nino Southern Oscillation region along the equator there in the Pacific. That's going to play a role, and I think we're going to start to see the atmosphere phase with that a little bit better, that transition, which means usually a very active April with severe weather, and definitely means we're not out of the woods yet with fire weather either, depending on where those storm systems track. And I am a little positive we've had quite a bit of moisture to our south and east, down in Oklahoma and Arkansas, even Texas. That helps kind of provide some just ambient moisture into the atmosphere. And anytime you get those southerly winds, we're going to bring some of that moisture northward, which will hopefully keep us from a prolonged dry period later in the spring, and helps provide us those chances of timely moisture, especially as you get later into spring and into early summer.
Chip, you mentioned it was Severe Weather Awareness Week. And so what are a few reminders for people to have on hand and prepared if the weather does get really bad?
Yeah, so this is a great time to just talk about severe weather and what you would do during severe weather with your family and friends, and kind of develop a plan. You don't have to have a plan necessarily right now, but develop one. Take this opportunity this week to think about it and communicate, hey, where are we going to go if there's a tornado? And if we get a tornado warning, and it's a good time to know that you need to get warnings from multiple sources. Don't rely on just your cell phone, because the cell phone networks can go down. They have accidents. They have issues sometimes. Weather radio is a great thing to have. And so once you get that warning, then you can react, and you can typically go to the innermost part of your structure. So interior bathrooms are great, and at the lowest floor. So you want to get down either in the basement or on the first floor if you don't have a basement. Away from windows, somewhere that's a solid room. If you have a safe room, it's a good time to go check it, make sure it's cleaned out, no snakes or cobwebs. And then probably the most important thing I recommend is if you have young ones, it could be very concerning for them. They get worried, they get stressed out. Make sure you have something for them to do, and you expect to potentially be in there for maybe more than a couple of minutes. It might be a longer duration event that you have to wait it out. We have early lead times these days of 15, 20 minutes sometimes before a storm impacts the area that you're in. So just to have something to keep them occupied, and have a radio to listen to updates and track that stuff on your phone, so you know when the all clear is there. Keep in mind the difference between watches and warnings as well. So review those plans so you know where to take action, when to take action, especially on days like Friday afternoon, Friday evening. Have a plan so you're not stuck out in the middle of nowhere.
Chip, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yep, thanks for having me.
That was K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we conclude our show with a Kansas wheat scoop as they discuss how Lee and Carolyn Musil directed nearly $1 million through their estate to the Kansas Wheat Research Foundation, marking its first realized legacy gift in establishing the Musil Center for Sustainable Wheat Production. Gordon Clark from Kansas Wheat has more on this.
The steady rhythm of wheat harvest defined much of Lee Musil's life. Now, that lifelong commitment to agriculture will continue strengthening Kansas wheat research for generations to come. Longtime supporters of wheat research, Lee and Carolyn Musil have made the first legacy gift realized by the Kansas Wheat Research Foundation since its creation in 2011. Through their estate plans, the Musils directed a major gift totaling nearly $1 million to support wheat research and innovation in Kansas. The Musil gift is the first estate gift received by the foundation. Not only is the gift significant to helping support wheat research, but hopefully it inspires others to consider the Kansas Wheat Research Foundation in their estates, said Aaron Harries, Kansas Wheat Vice President of Research and Operations. Deferred gifts help provide long-term stability to essential wheat research programs. Born in Marysville and raised near Burdett, Lee Musil earned a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in agricultural journalism from Kansas State University. While a student, he was active in Delta Upsilon and served in ROTC. He later worked as an agricultural journalist and editor before serving as an agricultural assistant to 1st District Congressman Keith Sabellis in Washington, D.C. Lee returned to the family farm near Burdett and married Carolyn Reich on May 3, 1980. Together, they were strongly rooted in production agriculture and community service. On the farm, Lee assisted with farming, irrigation, certified seed wheat, and beef cattle operations. In Great Bend, he was active in the Rotary Club of Great Bend and Trinity United Methodist Church. Carolyn Reich Musil was born in Beloit and graduated from Downs High School in 1965, receiving recognition as a Betty Crocker Homemaker of Tomorrow. She worked at Kansas State University and the Osborne County Extension Service before becoming a full-time farm wife and homemaker. She also served on the Pawnee County Extension Council and represented Southwest Kansas on the State Extension Advisory Council. Their legacy gift establishes the Musil Center for Sustainable Wheat Production, headquartered at the Kansas Wheat Innovation Center. The center represents a coordinated high-return public-private investment designed to strengthen wheat research across Kansas and the Great Plains. Established through the Musil's nearly $1 million estate gift, the first legacy gift realized by the Kansas Wheat Research Foundation. The center proposes to provide strategic oversight, facilitate collaboration with researchers and industry partners, and represent Kansas wheat research nationally and internationally. By creating centralized research leadership, the center intends to reduce duplication, align priorities, and accelerate delivery of practical science-based solutions to producers. Continued state investment will be essential to leverage private dollars, attract competitive federal and industry grants, and ensure Kansas remains a national leader in wheat production. Through this investment, the Musil family's pledge to wheat will continue far beyond their own fields, strengthening research, supporting producers, and molding the future of Kansas agriculture. For Kansas Wheat, this is Gordon Clark.
If you'd like to find more information about Kansas Wheat or check out their other resources, you can do so by going to their website, kswheat.com. If you're looking to find more wheat scoops, one way you can do that is by checking out K-State Extension's news website. That web address is Extension.K-State.edu. Both of these resources I will link in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Before we end today's show, I would like to let you know about the last K-State Crop Talk online webinar, which is happening on March 10th. This webinar will take place from noon to 1 p.m. The topic of March 10th's conversation is What's Bugging You? Insects to Watch For in the Field. Presenting on this topic will be K-State Extension entomologist Anthony Zukoff. These webinars are free and open to all. However, they do ask that you do get registered online, or you can talk to your local extension office. You can find more information about this by following the link in today's show notes on agtoday.net or by going to eupdate.agronomy.ksu.edu. That's all we have for you this week on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you on Monday.